Have you ever felt like you're too transparent for this world? Like your sensitivity is some kind of curse that pushes people away instead of drawing them closer? Maybe you've noticed that the more you allow yourself to feel deeply, the lonelier you become. The more you open yourself to the nuances of human existence, the harder it becomes to find someone who understands this silent language that your soul speaks. Albert Camus, the philosopher of the absurd, teaches us that this loneliness isn't your fault. It's the price of a more awakened consciousness. And today, we're going to explore why people like you, genuinely sensitive people, end up losing almost everyone around them. Not due to inadequacy, but because of a different way of being in the world. The first reason why sensitive people end up losing others around them lies in the emotional intensity that finds no echo in the superficial world that surrounds us. Camus spoke about the absurd as this fundamental disconnect between our need for meaning and the silence of the universe. For sensitive people, this absurd manifests even more acutely in the disconnect between their emotional depth and the predominant superficiality in human relationships. You feel things in an amplified way. A song isn't just a sequence of notes, but an experience that can completely alter your state of mind for hours. A casual conversation with a stranger can leave you reflecting for days about the subtexts, the unspoken emotions, the human connections that sketched themselves in those few minutes. When you try to share this rich and multifaceted experience with others, you frequently encounter empty stares, subject changes, or worse still, the feeling that you're being dramatic or exaggerated. It's not exaggeration, it's just that your capacity to feel operates on a different frequency. Like a radio tuned to a station that few can pick up, you receive signals that others don't perceive, process emotions that others ignore, live internal experiences that others would consider irrelevant. This emotional intensity creates an invisible barrier. People feel uncomfortable with depth because it forces them to confront their own superficialities. Your sensitivity acts as an involuntary mirror that reflects back to others their own emotional limitations, their own resistances to feeling more fully. And because facing this reflection is uncomfortable, people often choose the easier path: withdrawal. They don't understand that your intensity isn't an attack or a judgment, but simply your natural way of processing existence. For Camus, this incompatibility isn't a problem to be solved, but a condition to be accepted. The absurd man, the one who fully recognizes the contradictory nature of existence, learns to live with this tension without trying to soften or deny it. The second reason lies in the need for authenticity that sensitive people carry as an existential mark. Camus deeply valued authenticity as a response to the absurd condition of life. For him, living authentically meant refusing consoling illusions and artificial social roles that society offers to soften the harshness of existence. Sensitive people feel this need for authenticity even more urgently. You've probably already noticed how difficult it is for you to participate in conversations you consider empty, smile in situations you don't find genuinely funny, or maintain relationships based on social conventions instead of real connection. This need to be true to yourself and to others becomes a natural filter that eliminates many relationship possibilities. While most people can comfortably navigate between different social personas, alternating masks as the situation demands, you feel exhausted and uncomfortable with this dynamic. It's not that you're incapable of adapting your behavior to different contexts, but rather that you need this adaptation to maintain some coherence with your internal core. You can't simply turn on and off aspects of your personality to fit others' expectations. This rigidity, which is actually integrity, ends up creating situations where you become incompatible with environments and people that depend on superficiality to function. At parties, you might feel like a foreigner trying to understand a language that everyone speaks fluently, but sounds false to your ears. At work, you might have difficulties with organizational politics because you can't completely separate your personal convictions from your professional obligations. In romantic relationships, you might scare partners who aren't prepared for the level of honesty and vulnerability that you offer naturally. What others see as intensity or complication, you experience as the only possible way to exist with dignity. Camus would say you're living in revolt against existential dishonesty, refusing to accept a life diminished by falseness. This revolt is necessary and valuable, but it has a social cost. Most people, unconsciously, prefer the security of superficiality to the risk of depth. Your insistence on authenticity forces them to confront their own choices for less examined, less questioned, less lived lives. Stop for a moment and reflect. How many times have you felt like you were speaking a language that no one else understands? How many times has your sensitivity been interpreted as weakness or exaggeration? If this resonates with you, leave a comment saying, "I feel this too." Your experience isn't unique, and sharing these reflections helps other sensitive people feel less alone on this journey. You're not alone in this, and your response might be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel understood. The third reason why sensitive people lose others around them lies in the depth of questioning they carry about existence and human relationships. Camus taught us that the absurd man is one who questions everything, who doesn't accept ready-made answers or comfortable truths without subjecting them to the scrutiny of reason and experience. Sensitive people tend to carry this characteristic even more pronouncedly. You probably can't accept superficial explanations for complex questions. When someone says that things are just this way or it's always been like this, something inside you rebels against this resignation. You want to understand why. You want to explore the deeper layers of phenomena, whether they're emotional, social, or existential. This tendency toward deep questioning naturally extends to your relationships. You don't settle for friendships based only on shared activities or geographical convenience. You want to know people in their complexities, their contradictions, their most intimate fears and aspirations. You ask questions that others consider uncomfortable or inappropriate. Questions about the meaning people find in their lives, about their regrets, about their most secret hopes. Questions that go beyond what someone does for a living and investigate how someone finds reasons to keep living. This thirst for deep understanding scares many people because it forces them to confront aspects of themselves they'd prefer to keep unexplored. Most people build their identities on foundations that have never been truly examined. Deep questioning threatens the stability of these constructions. It's more comfortable to maintain relationships on the surface, where there's no risk of discovering internal inconsistencies or existential voids. Your need to go beyond the surface is interpreted as invasive or excessively intellectual. People begin to feel judged, even when your questioning comes from a place of genuine curiosity and not superiority. They don't understand that your exploration of human depths comes from a place of love for the complexity of human experience, not from a desire to expose inadequacies. For Camus, this tendency toward deep questioning is an existential virtue. It's what keeps us alive intellectually and emotionally in a world that constantly invites us to dormancy. But it's also a characteristic that isolates us, because most people prefer the security of simple answers to the risky adventure of complex questions. The fourth reason lies in the acute perception that sensitive people have of human nuances and contradictions, a perception that can become a social burden. Camus spoke about lucidity as one of the fundamental characteristics of the absurd man. This lucidity involves the ability to see things as they really are, without the comfortable filters of illusion or denial. For sensitive people, this lucidity manifests as a natural ability to perceive discrepancies between what people say and what they really feel, between their declared intentions and their hidden motivations, between their social masks and their internal realities. You've probably already experienced the uncomfortable situation of perceiving that someone is lying or being dishonest when everyone around seems to accept the official version of facts. Or perhaps you've noticed patterns of destructive behavior in loved ones long before these patterns became evident to others. This ability to see through appearances is both a gift and a curse. It's a gift because it allows you to understand people at deeper levels and develop genuine empathy for their internal struggles. It's a curse because it creates a peculiar form of loneliness. You live in a world where you perceive layers of reality that others don't see or choose to ignore. It's as if you were the only person in a room who could see that the emperor is naked, while everyone else continues praising his imaginary clothes. This acute perception also means you have difficulties accepting relationships based on dynamics you consider problematic or unbalanced. You perceive when a friendship is one-sided, when a romantic relationship is based on dependency instead of genuine love, when family dynamics are toxic even if maintained by tradition. Your inability to pretend you don't see these realities makes you be perceived as complicated, critical, or hard to please. People feel that you see too much, and this makes them uncomfortable. They prefer relationships with people who accept simplified versions of reality, who don't question established dynamics, who don't see through carefully constructed facades. Camus would say that this lucidity, though painful, is essential for an authentic life. It's preferable to live in the solitude of truth than in the company of illusion. But this doesn't make the resulting isolation less challenging to bear. The fifth and perhaps deepest reason lies in the way sensitive people experience and express love and care in a form that can be interpreted as excessive or suffocating by those who don't share the same emotional intensity. Camus spoke about passion as one of the possible responses to the absurd condition of existence. For him, living passionately meant completely embracing the experience of being alive, even knowing that this experience is temporary and ultimately without guarantees of transcendent meaning. Sensitive people tend to love with this same passionate intensity. When you care about someone, you care completely. You can't love halfway, be interested superficially, or invest emotionally in a calculated and self-protective way. You offer your complete attention, your genuine interest, your true concern. You remember details that others consider insignificant. You worry about people's well-being in a way that goes beyond social courtesy. You offer emotional support that goes beyond what is conventionally expected. This way of loving and caring, though genuine and valuable, can be interpreted as invasive or excessive. People might feel pressured by your intensity, even when this intensity comes from a place of pure love. They might interpret your attention as possessiveness, your concern as control, your interest as invasion of privacy. We live in a culture that values emotional detachment as synonymous with maturity, that teaches that loving too much is a defect to be corrected. Your inability to love in a lukewarm or conventionally appropriate way makes you be perceived as needy or emotionally immature. People withdraw not because you offer too little, but because you offer too much. They're not prepared to receive the level of love and attention that you offer naturally. This creates a cruel paradox. The more you demonstrate capacity to love deeply, the more people feel inadequate in their own capacities to reciprocate this love, and the more they withdraw to protect themselves from the uncomfortable comparison. Camus would teach us that this passionate way of existing is valuable regardless of its reception. The value of love doesn't diminish when it's not reciprocated or understood. The capacity to love intensely is a form of revolt against the indifference of the universe, an affirmation of life in face of its transitory nature. If you've made it this far in this reflection, you probably recognize a lot of yourself in these words. And if this is true for you, I'd like to invite you on a journey of even deeper discoveries. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these existential questions that touch us so deeply. Here we create a space for people who feel deeply, who question intensely, who seek authenticity in a world that often seems to content itself with appearances. You don't need to carry these reflections alone. There exists a community of people who share this sensitivity, this search for meaning, this need to live with truth and intensity. Camus offers us a liberating perspective on this apparently solitary condition of sensitive people. He teaches us that the isolation resulting from our sensitivity isn't a defect to be corrected, but a natural consequence of a more conscious and authentic way of existing. The philosopher of the absurd shows us that solitude can be transformed into solidarity when we understand that our condition, though particular, reflects universal aspects of human experience. All of us, at some level, experience the disconnect between our need for deep connection and the predominant superficiality in the world. The difference is that sensitive people feel this disconnect more acutely and refuse to anesthetize it with distractions or consoling illusions. Your sensitivity isn't an obstacle to human relationship, but an invitation to more authentic and meaningful relationships. It's true that this invitation isn't always accepted. It's true that many people will prefer to remain in the safety of the surface instead of venturing into the depths you offer. But this doesn't make your invitation less valuable or necessary. In Camus' philosophy, The value of our actions and choices doesn't depend on their universal acceptance, but on their authenticity and the dignity with which we perform them. You don't need to diminish your sensitivity to fit into relationships that don't understand it. You don't need to become less deep to be more accepted. You don't need to learn to love with less intensity so as not to scare those who aren't prepared to receive true love. What you need is to learn to honor your sensitivity as a legitimate and valuable way of being in the world. You need to understand that losing people who can't deal with your authenticity isn't really a loss, but a liberation. It's the creation of space for genuine relationships, for connections that honor the totality of who you are. Camus teaches us that absurd revolt isn't an act of negation, but of affirmation. When you refuse to diminish your sensitivity to fit into an insensitive world, you're affirming the value of depth in face of superficiality, of authenticity in face of convenience, of true love in face of indifference. This affirmation is an act of existential courage that contributes to the dignity of all human experience. Your sensitivity, even when misunderstood, serves as a reminder that it's possible to live more fully, feel more deeply, love more truly. And even if you find yourself frequently alone on this journey, remember that you've chosen the company of truth over the illusion of superficial belonging. In Camus's view, this is always the most dignified choice, even when it's the loneliest one.